Today on Spotlight Now, we continue on in our conversation about rediscovering Hawaii's soul.
We'll be focusing on Hawaii's relationship with the military, speaking with leaders from the Native Hawaiian community and Marine Corps Base Hawaii. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. We want to engage all of you who are watching both on air and online, and encourage those of you who are watching online to enter your questions about our topic today in the comment section of our Facebook page at Hawaii News Now. And you can also get engaged with us by scanning this QR code that you see at the bottom of your screen throughout the conversation. We will be tracking the comments that come in and pose them to our guests themselves. Yunji, we are continuing in our conversation about rediscovering Hawaii's soul, which is sponsored by the Hawaii Executive Collaborative, a partner of our show here. And today we have an interesting topic.
Yeah, it is one that is complicated and so important, and that is Hawaii's relationship with the military. We want to start off by welcoming our first guest, Corbett Kalama, who is part of the Hawaii Executive Collaborative's leadership. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, aloha. It's a privilege to be here and be a part of this. A great effort.
Yeah, and so we've done a number of shows about rediscovering Hawaii's soul, but we always assume that the audience perhaps missed those or needs a little bit of a brush up. So for folks who aren't familiar, what is rediscovering Hawaii's soul all about?
Well, first thing I just want to say, mai no o e kaohani nui, how mai kaola. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for the gift of life. And, in Hawaii, we have a saying, ika malu e nā kupuna, and that we walk in the shadows of those that came before us, or in the footsteps. And so, and when we looked at the Restoring Hawaii's Soul, I think you've got to go back to what inspired us. Back in 1970, Aunty Pulahi, our legislative leaders gathered together with Aunty Pulahi Paki in 1970 at the legislature, and Aunty Pulahi Paki articulated what it meant that Hawaiian word aloha, to bring together body, mind, and spirit. And coincidentally for me, that's my auntie. So in 1962, the same message that she was sharing with the legislators at that time, I was privy to, and she took the word aloha and broke it into individual words. And that became the essence of what the Hawaii Soul talked about. So sometimes people will ask me, how did you get involved in that? I think, we're all where we're supposed to be. And so in 1986, the Aloha Spirit Law was created. But you go 50 years later, this group gets together because there's still a lot of conflict and issues that have come up that, if not resolved amicably in a way that takes into consideration ideas and the differences and the things that have happened in our community over time, acknowledging those areas where we've misstepped as a community. It's important that we get together and resolve that. So when you look at Restoring Hawaii's Soul, it's about that, bringing together leaders of the community. And I think it was August of 2022, Dwayne Cariso's leadership got us all together, 43 people sitting in a room, not really knowing why we're there. And I remember talking to some of our members there, people such as, Uncle Walter Riddy, Kawai Kapu Hewitt, Aunty Pua Kanakaole, Aunty Hokulani. You brought the broader members of the hula community in with other generals and CEOs, and everybody's sitting there worrying, okay, what's next? And really the answer there was, we're here because we all love Hawaii. But we also recognize that if we're going to move forward as a community, we need to be able to sit down with each other, knowing that we start from that place, and that to be willing to listen and learn, and then look for a way that we can work together to ensure that the Aloha Spirit, working together, showing love for one another, recognizing that we need to look for ways to reach consensus, that through our connectivity and our willingness to do that, we can emerge successful in addressing our efforts. And so today we're here to talk about a real interesting topic, which has had different perspectives from different parts of the community, but I'm just one voice out there, so I'm just privileged to be a part of this.
Before we get to the topic of the military and the relationship with Hawaii that we are going to be diving into today, I also want to talk about just some of the other issues and topics that have come up in these conversations and these workshops with other leaders that you spoke of. What are some of the issues and topics that are currently being addressed by this group? And if you can give updates about how collectively these conversations are going.
I think, let me just back up a bit. One of the reasons why I think the 43 initial members came through was because of the opportunity to bring their voice to the different issues that they represent. Everything from from sovereignty discussions that go on there. What do we do with the military? What about our housing issues? How can Hawaii survive without addressing our food issues? How do we really build a sustainable agricultural structure here to feed our people? You know, how vulnerable are we to a number of different issues? How do we avoid our homeless projects, our homeless situation that we have? How do we bring resolution to that? So there wasn't, every social issue that we faced in the community was present, and it was an issue that everybody was concerned with.
And when we, just to give the audience some background, you know, you start with that initial convening of those 43 folks, and in the time since then, there have been monthly meetings for certain areas like the military, climate, tourism, things like that, and then larger convenings. In those conversations, just to give our audience kind of a perspective, what are those conversations like, and what comes out of them?
Oh, let me just say, those conversations have just been encouraging, inspiring, humbling. And it's allowed us all to really stretch ourselves individually, to recognize that we're there, and while what we have to say may have some importance to the group, that's not why we're there. We're there to learn from each other. And so when you look at it, you have people that are really steeped in Hawaiian education and understanding it. The question that would arise, and even it was my question as a Native Hawaiian, how can we speak to restoring the soul of Hawaii without really addressing the issues of those people from where the essence of aloha is derived? So that was a big part of it, and it was something that people embraced, but people brought to it their life experience. So what was really evident in the room was the ability for people to talk. We talk about our mokuauhau in the Hawaiian culture, but everyone there had their own stories from different ethnic groups and what that happened. But it was a very lively, involved conversation. No physical challenges, but very, very emotional, and it was really interesting. We all realized that today that what some of us take for granted, that people understand what the words even mean. You know, someone in the group may view it as being very confrontational, but it wasn't. Like, yeah, you know, what does that mean? So we had one individual, I won't mention the name, talked to a corporate CEO, and the CEO goes, "Corbett, you know, what does this mean?" I said, "Well, ask your friend over here." And the Hawaiian friend was a Hawaiian community leader to have explained this to this gentleman, and I won't speak. So the speaker was going to give away some of that part, but it was one thing good about. The reason why I said that is within our group we talk about being private in the sense that before we talk about any one individual, I know I mentioned Dwayne Caruso as coordinating this thing. That's the extent that I'll go. We have an agreement that within us, before I speak of someone, I'll honor that and ask their permission to speak of that. So, but yes, in broad answer to your question, terrific. So what's been neat is we've had thousands of people now. We realize that it can only, Hawaii's going through a leadership change, but if the opio of the group aren't brought along and so that they have input, and the children and the youngsters and the young leaders within the group don't have the opportunity to speak their voice, because it's their future that we're impacting. None of the discussions that we're having are going to have any meaning and sustainability. So it's a very vibrant. We had a group not too long ago. My niece was there, so I knew, oh boy, here I go. But it was really neat for them to be able to stand there, be proud, but be able to articulate their respective positions. And so you have people that are taking over companies. You know, we have a lot of old families here that have controlled certain parts of the land and development, but they're realizing too that it's got to be a collaborative effort. So it's a terrific time. It's encouraging for me.
When you're talking and you're having some of these tough conversations, especially like the one that we're talking about today with Hawaii's relationship with the U.S. military, from a Native Hawaiian standpoint, there are some people in the community who obviously have a lot of hurt there, and there's been a lot of past trauma, generational trauma that have been done to the Hawaiian people, and so when you are trying to have this conversation, how do you bridge that gap and find common ground and try to get over some of the histories and all the wrongdoings that have been felt by the Native Hawaiian community with a group of people like the military, who many Native Hawaiians view as a threat?
Yeah, for me, first, just as we were all taught, right, you have to be willing to forgive. If you can forgive, then you can listen and learn. But without opening yourself up to forgiving someone for any type of missteps, you've got that block. So the first thing was that. But even with respect to that, one is to forgive. But then when you ask for forgiveness, you have to first, if you were the perpetrator, to to acknowledge the role that we played. And what I find in the interactions that I've had with the military in my role with the collaborative has been it's been a very open discussion, but a lot of that discussion about that acknowledgement of the role that they played, but also we can't speak about the missteps that may have occurred with the military without talking about the benefits of the military. And one most recently, and not that the Native Hawaiian community's feelings can be bought by anyone, but for me, I'm practically speaking, I've already spoke about the impact that the military had on me as a kid, but also most recently for me with respect to the COVID and the impact that it was having on Hawaii. What I need to commend the military for, they kept our economy running, roughly over about $18 billion. The work that I did at that time away was with the Weinberg Foundation, and we help a lot of nonprofits. And I can say that without the military keeping our economy moving, we'd have issues as we go forward. So I'm trying to acknowledge that there. And so we've got to find a balance. Let me just say that, some of the recent discussions about in the military, or even like if you look at Mauna Kea, for example, Puakaloa and those types of things, there's a benefit and what some view as a detriment to Hawaiian culture. But I do think, when we go back and look at our history, we've got to look for ways to find a sense of balance.
I know that as part of these convenings, there was a meeting that happened with military brass, not just from here on island, but also coming in from Washington. You were part of those discussions without, maintaining that confidentiality. I'm just interested in how that invitation was received, and the folks who were in the room, because this is new for them as well to have this kind of conversation. What was that meeting like?
I think one thing that was really consistent amongst everybody knew that they were coming there not for themselves. They came there representing a perspective. And that was really noticeable, And so, just like with any new meeting, you go there, and you sit and you figure, okay, where do I sit? Do I sit with my group, or do I sit with the last remaining seat? Well, fortunately, I got there a little late, so I just sat next to all these different guys and ladies that were there. But it was really neat to first be able to sit there and you see the name badge and everything. But after a while, you realize you're only relevant to those that deem you relevant. And if the issue is that I'm there to look to see that to get my point across only and have you support it, I should not be in that meeting. So everybody knew that we were there to represent something larger than ourselves. And it was interesting to watch as time sat down, some of the conversations we were having. The facilitators did a great job just getting us all open, mixing us up in different groups. So of course the first thing is, you go through any type of group, right? You're forming, you're norming, you're storming, and then you join at it, then you start performing. But it was really interesting to see the groups start blending. And one of the issues that I found really meaningful for me is housing's huge in Hawaii. Housing issues are huge. So I got to get into those types of discussions with my background in housing and doing a lot of affordable things and working with those that are less fortunate to really address the issue and my perspective about what impact the military has had, both positive and negative, on the housing issue within our community. So are there resources within the military structure that would help us here in Hawaii address our larger housing issue? Not only for Native Hawaiians, but for the broader community. But even with that said, with the issues that arise, I was able to educate them, and not that I was educated, I got to share my perspective on where we needed help with respect to the Hawaiian homes, because of the limited funding though. So it opened up their eyes to a whole number of things, and my eyes open too, knowing that the military has certain other means to help address our issues. But I found it to be very conciliatory for both of us, not just one side, for both sides to recognize, okay, we're here to try and resolve and address important issues. We're not going to resolve them today, but if we can continue to have an ongoing discussion, I think we'll be able to work through and hopefully do the best for all communities involved.
And as things begin to evolve with these conversations, and more people hear about this through this program or however else they may be introduced to these topics and to rediscovering Hawaii. So how do you think this will impact the larger community? What is the ultimate goal long term that you would see as a success of this movement?
Well, for me, the most thing is that most people will be informed. Because the manner in which we were rolling this out, we started with different leaders of 43 individuals, but from that we subsequently asked them to start inviting people within their sphere of influence. So you start seeing that, like I mentioned, my niece was there the last time, and she was heavily involved with Punana Leo. She does a lot of different things with the DOE. And to have them to be able to sit there with the district superintendent, for example, and to be on the same level, right? Because everybody's there not about the respective responsibilities that they have in the community, but I have input. I have equal input. I'm there on the page. And it was interesting. There's a question about power. How do you, and auntie, one of the aunties was running this breakout session. And one individual, how we view power is really interesting. And so one asked the question, Corbett, what's your power? And I said, my power is I care about people. I've been able to do a lot of different things in finance and everything, but my big thing is I care about people, and that's allowed me the opportunity to have doors open when I call, because that's what my passion is. And I said, so power doesn't necessarily manifest itself in being loud or demonstrative. If you're in those types of positions where you control money, that's not necessarily the most significant component. People need to know that you care about them and the community, and you're willing to serve. And so it's been really neat it's those types of discussions at that level, but to see that next generation and that new group of leaders and to come in and speak about it, but also to recognize that what we may have as knowledge, we cannot expect everybody to have that. We've got to be able to teach. My mother would always say, and my mother was a kumuhula who was part of the Ilala'ole genealogy. Auntie Lokale Montgomery was her teacher. And we were around Auntie Iolani Luhini all the time, and they would often say, do not get angry all the time. They just don't know. You need to teach, right? And so but it's two ways, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
Where do you hope, building on Ryan's question, we know, you mentioned Mauna Kea, you mentioned Pohakuloa, we know these leases are coming up. How do you think conversations like this at this level can help to, can influence or permeate those decisions and discussions that are coming?
I think these conversations are good because the door is open. There's a door. The door has been wide open. And the neat thing is to have those leaders that are respected in those respective, like Auntie Puakanakole. She knows, she's the first one to tell you that I don't speak for everybody, but people respect her, right? And to have that, or to have Kawai Kapu to come in there, Auntie Hokulani to come in, but yet on the other side to have somebody that's really gung-ho the other way, to come and sit in a meeting and say, these are all reasonable people, and they're part, so the door's open. And then, but the critical part for me is you've got the younger generation of leaders coming in. So I thought that the most significant meeting that we've had was the last one. I remember walking into that group, and I told Dwayne, this is the group. Because they're all that generation. They're all the 30s, the 20s, 30s, 40-year-olds that are active. They're into it, but they're concerned about the future of Hawaii, and they're going to carry us forward to this next stage. So having them at that meeting, that last meeting we had, was maybe about a month ago, that was so inspiring for me to be able to be around those folks, because they're energetic. You can talk, but don't talk too much. You got to do, So yeah.
With regards to this, this specific topic with the military and Hawaii, what do you think would be a win for this organization? Is it just having this conversation to begin with, or are there other things that you think would signify a successful relationship or a successful venture in this?
First thing is a commitment to an open dialogue, continued open dialogue, and to have the military be responsive. Not necessarily in agreeing to whatever it is, because I can't speak for the respective communities that have been influenced. I don't live on Hawaii Island. I have many family members that are there. I've been very close to the issues at Mauna Kea, but again, I bring my level of expertise to help give guidance, but never to tell. And so what I do see is the willingness for people to sit down and talk through and recognize that there are other solutions. I think sometimes, like in anything, if the path of least resistance is so often the path that people take, but in this, we might have to meander around for a while. We know what we want to get. We want to restore Hawaii. We want to make sure that Hawaii continues to be the special place. But it's the world we live in now. Hawaii can be a spotlight and a beacon for the rest of the world to say, we've been. People refer to us as a melting pot. We're much more than that. We're very innovative. We're very accepting. We're very inclusive. And it's an opportunity now with the two huge issues involving the military and the community, to sit down and continue to have these meaningful discussions. And I've seen a great deal of progress. I think, but progress is measured in terms of the individual seeing how fast or slow they want to go. But what I've been able to experience through the RHS group involved in having people show up at the meetings in the first place and stay the entire time, and then when the meeting's over, they don't want to leave. So it's been neat. But to see people as people.
In that convening with the military leaders, I'm interested, we talk a lot about shifts that are felt. I'm wondering if you felt that there was a shift not only in yourself, but also in others in the room who may not traditionally, may not have been exposed to this work in the past.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, visibly for me, just to see people sitting with each other at lunch, something as simple as that, or going to a table or looking to bring people into a discussion. I saw a lot of that, and that's where I see the growth in what our RHS and through our RIOS partners have been able to accomplish over time. If you look at the subsequent meetings where these people come back to, now they're friends. And even some of the individuals that I was interacting with within the Hawaiian community, I remember calling my wife and telling her, guess who I'm talking to, She says, oh boy, when in times past we had conflict within what we were doing. Because some of the things that I was doing from a Native Hawaiian recognition standpoint at that time for Senator Akaka, in my work that I was doing on that, not everybody agreed with it, but what it was seeing was it was a step in the direction. And I think when back to Ryan's question, this is a step in that direction of resolution. We're going to stumble all over the place, but that means that we're listening, we're pausing, and we're moving carefully. And so when Auntie Pilai talked about bringing together body, mind, and spirit, that's what she talked about. The Aloha Spirit Law speaks to doing what the community would want you to do in that situation. And it's been used in political situations where they didn't have the majority vote, and that was it. So there's a way we go back to Auntie Pilai and the guidance that she gave us. And Aloha is who we are.
Just before we wrap up here with you, how can the public learn more information as they continue to hear this? How can they get involved and learn more about what's happening here?
Yeah, I would say that through RHS and the community, Linnell Marble and her group will continue to do outreach work to make sure that we get the broader community actively involved through their respective organizations and to tuning into Spotlight.
All right, Corbett Kalama from Hawaii Executive Collaborative, thank you for being here today. We've got 2 more guests on the other side of this break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hello and welcome back to Spotlight. Now we're continuing on in our conversation about rediscovering Hawaii Soul, and now we're joined by two guests. Before we introduce them, we want to, of course, continue to encourage those of you who are watching to enter your questions and engage in our conversations. You can support these conversations by entering your comments into the comment section on Facebook, or you can scan this QR code that you'll see in the bottom of your screen.
We're so happy now to welcome in the second half of our show, the second two guests joining us now. Mehana Okala-Hine, Senior Advisor to the CEO at the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, and Doug Wadsworth, Chief of Staff at Marine Corps Base Hawaii. Thank you both for being here.
Aloha.
So we've given your titles, but I'm interested to know how each of you came to do the work with Rediscovering Hawaii's Soul. And let's just start there. Mehana, let's start with you.
Yeah, so the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, of course, we were invited into the very early on discussions. So before there was a Rediscovering Hawaii's Soul, there was a conversation that needed to happen between the Native Hawaiian community and the business community. And thankfully, we were asked to come and participate. And from then on, it's been about a 3 to probably going on 4 years soon of engagement in different fields. We went from the business industry into the U.S. military.
Yeah, and I know that we've had conversations on this program about tourism, about climate, about ceded lands, and we've been really looking forward to this one on the military. And so, Doug, how about you? How did you get involved with RHS?
So I'm currently serving as the Chief of Staff at Marine Corps Base Hawaii. And in June of 23, Dwayne Kirisu invited a single member of each of the military components to one of the network gatherings. And my commanding officer had just arrived and turned over and was unavailable to go. And so I was lucky to get the opportunity to go, and I wasn't quite sure what I was getting into when I got there. And it was a really, really great 3 days of just getting to know new people. There were some other military folks there, but predominantly it was a much broader, grouping of educators and business owners. And it was just neat to be able to hear what they were trying to do. It's where we heard about the scenarios for the first time, and where I started formulating, all right, how do we as military members engage in this so we can be better part of the community?
And Doug, sticking with you, as things began evolving through these conversations that were happening with Rediscovering Hawaii Soul, and one of the topics, of course, was the U.S. military and their role in Hawaii and recognizing things that have happened in the past. What was your thoughts about heading into that conversation, and how did you think the U.S. military would receive this, if they would be open to being involved in something like this, and maybe some of the conversations that you had to have during that time?
Well, I think initially, as I made my way around the room to the various groups that they had set up and the discussions that they had arranged, I was initially surprised at how little they were talking about the military. And when they did, it didn't seem real complimentary. And so my initial thought was, well, I've got to be outspoken here. I've got to tell everybody about the good things that we're doing. We have this history that we need to overcome. And so that was kind of the initial, hey, let's talk about the military's future in Hawaii, and that was kind of the title of the hui that was set up at the end of the 3 days. And we recognized that it wasn't just, well, what does the military look like in Hawaii? It's more, how does the military engage the community in Hawaii and vice versa, so that we can get through some of these broader divides. And that kind of kicked us into this last year of monthly meetings and more people joining us to be part of the discussion.
And Mehana, what have those discussions been like? Because as Ryan said, and as we acknowledged in our conversation with Corbett, it's a mixed history, to be fair. And there are some wonderful things that Corbett brought up, and there's also a lot of pain. So how do we acknowledge that, and what is I guess the question is, what is the goal of all of this? Where do we want to get to? Where does the group hope to get to in these discussions?
If we step back, there's not just a lot of pain or I want to take it out of the romantic era and kind of put a little realism in there. And we talk real to each other in these meetings, right? We have real discussions about water, about land, about leadership, about the health and well-being of our communities, about Iwi Kupuna, about all kinds of issues that are between our two communities, right? If we look at the military as a community and the rest of Hawaii as a community, right? We have some really important issues to iron out. This is just one of the forums. It's an important forum to have, right? What HEC has built is an important forum where people can come together and actually have those real conversations, be respectful for each other so that we can hear each other. But it is by no means an easy walk in the park. Yeah, I don't make Doug's life easier. He doesn't make my life easy. But we have these real conversations. And for me, I think what I see as the goal, Don, is that one, we can sit together as human beings with a sense of humanity to discuss the issues that are really, really important for us to get right really soon, right? Like right now, get it right now. Or our Hawaii is not going to be the Hawaii that either of us want to live in, right? Or, I will never leave Hawaii, but the health and well-being of it is all of our responsibility, So how is it that we work together to get that? And that's not an easy conversation at all.
I want to just follow up with your specific role in this because, there may be some in the Native Hawaiian community who will hear that these conversations are having and look to you as someone who represents this community and say, how are you having these conversations? Have you told them, and it puts that pressure back on you, knowing that you're representing a large voice, many people who have some pains and hurts of the past. How do you explain to them this conversation and the importance of why this needs to happen?
Mahalo for that question. I realize the role that we have as Native Hawaiians in different arenas of our community, and our access to have these conversations are really important. And I think if this is 20 years ago, it would be really difficult to answer that question because there was probably just two conversations going on at that time, two arenas, two access points, where you could get in. That was either if you were in the institutions themselves, in the business community, in the military itself, and or you were actively out on the streets with your signs protesting the actions, right? Today, we have access to much more. I shouldn't say many, because there still needs to be more, but a bunch of different pathways. And the reason why I learned this is we had one of the uncles that is very active on the west side. Especially in commands leadership and commands access to the military themselves, and they've built up their voice in those areas. So my role now doesn't become the voice of the Hawaiian people. My role becomes the support to what's going on in the individual communities out there. I think I have it a lot easier now than, say, our advocates 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, who were just trying to get heard. Now my role specifically is to elevate those conversations that are existing in the communities and make sure if there's something that's missing, that gets put on the agenda, right? And then push back out into the community, right? Like, okay, you got to go talk to these people over there. So, yeah.
Doug, I'm interested in the nature of the conversations because what Mehana laid out, those are tough issues when you talk about housing, the environment, land access, who gets to make these decisions about water, all of those things that are very present in the minds. You're right to delineate between wrongs of the past, but also very, very important issues that are happening right in this moment. When you're having these discussions, how do they not turn into large-scale confrontations? Because these are really, really hard.
They don't always not turn into large-scale. No, actually, I think that we have done a really good job through some super facilitation from HEC, from Rios Partners, who's been part of this all along, who have a way of setting up conversations that can be polite and yet still hard. People have come away offended, Some people haven't come back. But for the most part, people recognize how important they are. And it goes from something as broad or as big as Hawaiian sovereignty, where we go, well, our little hui that's made up of local folks, military, installation, senior people, are not going to solve the Hawaiian sovereignty challenge, if you will. But rolling out of our hui, as HEC, listened and saw what we were doing, they invited, and I know you talked earlier with Corbett about the broader convening where some very senior folks came out from Washington, D.C. In the various military services, and were here to listen. And I was really surprised on both sides that people they often talk about being present. They were present. Senior people, in my experience in the military, they have aides. They're often yanked aside. Hey, this email just came in. Can you please come and answer something big that's going on in Washington? None of them did that. They sat down, they listened, and I think at the end of the several-day period, there was a renewed respect, I think, for some very senior people, who had been involved in some of the larger issues like Koalavi, who went, I've never talked to somebody this senior before who actually was willing to listen. And so I think there's been a significant amount of patience, and the environment is right now, I think, for people to come together and actually have those conversations.
And Mehana, I want to just follow up with you on when those conversations were happening and that meeting happened with, these top brass that were coming down from Washington, D.C. What was your perception of their, how they reacted to some of the things that you were saying, and what were some of the key takeaways that you got from that interaction?
They were very solution-oriented when they came from D.C. and walked and met us, in the meeting space. And that was very, it definitely opened the doors to better conversation. They showed up, ready to listen, but not only to listen, because that can sometimes, just go in one ear out the other ear. But they were sitting down. We're sitting on tables, trying to find solutions to. And again, it wasn't the question of the everything, but it was topic by topic. And one of the things that HEC always has, and this makes a difference, is there's always kupuna in the room with us, right? There are living kupuna inside that room with us that assure that what is being given and the behavior of everybody in the room, not only the behavior, but the passion that everybody has, right? Because the military folks are bringing their passion too. We're trying to protect the nation. We are doing this, we're doing that, right? And then you have Aina, people who are going, but you're destroying our land. And you're right, those conversations can turn into brawls if, not. But there's kupuna there who help us, along with the facilitators, help us shape those discussions. And they're a feisty bunch. They're a feisty bunch. So we're not scared of each other, right? Like we don't it's the kupuna that we're watching that we don't offend in there, and that helps us have those types of conversations. Very real, but respectful, and let's try and find the solutions to things.
So much of the conversations that we've had around rediscovering Hawaii Soul, no matter the topic, have been about building relationships. So I'm just interested in the relationship that you two have built, what that has been like. On its face, you might not be the most likely pairing, but I'm just curious as to what that has been like for each of you. Let's start with you.
Yeah, every time I have questions. I just was asking them a bunch of questions inside the room, as we prepared for this about, okay, so what's happening with this? What's happening with that? And I think we can have those conversations. We can have those conversations, and what he knows he'll share, and what I know I'll share, and we'll have conversations about the things that matter to us. I have no doubt, because Doug lives in community here, right, and Hawaii has become home, that we have shared interests in making this place, healthy for all of us, right? We just got to figure out how that is, between us. So, yeah, again, I don't think he's happy every time he sees me. Walk in the door, it's just like, oh my God, here we go. Here's Rihanna again. But I always appreciate that there's a willingness to keep showing up.
And Doug, from that first convening that you went to, you're saying that you didn't hear a lot of people necessarily addressing the issues that you thought were pretty relevant, right, about the military. Yeah. What has it been like to build this relationship with Mehana and others in the group?
It has been great. And as Mehana said, I think both sides come with passion. And the military wants to say, hey, we're here for you all. Why are you griping at us? And the other side says, yeah, but you pay no attention to our culture. You need to get educated. And as we've gone through the last year with our hui, one of the things to me that has been very significant is the educational piece, where those of us who didn't grow up in Hawaii have learned about the Aina, have learned about the connection to the land, the familial connection to the land that exists here that just matters. And those who grew up here who may not know quite as much about the military have learned about the strategic nature of Hawaii and the Pacific and why we need to be here and the threat that's out there. And I think it's allowed both sides to go, okay, I see where you're coming from. I see where you're coming from, and then allow better conversation to move forward.
If you can update us since these conversations happened, Doug, maybe if you can let us know, like, what have been some of the successes? What has transpired beyond the conversations, or things that maybe the military has already begun looking to do, listening to the concerns of the Native Hawaiian community? And if you can just kind of give us some highlights of some of the action points that have been taken.
Well, I think the biggest thing to me is probably recognition, from outside of Hawaii, as to how important this conversation is. As an example, Marine Corps is part of the Department of the Navy. We have an Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Installations, Environment, and Energy. And she came out to visit. She's come out many times. And this most recent visit, we probably spent 2 hours on the bay with members of Ko'olaupoko Civic Association. Kawai Kapu and Auntie Rocky gave this great cultural training that probably would never have happened previously, because there was this appetite to know more about the culture. So as we see senior people coming back, it gets them focused. Locally, we're able to do things like engage with Paipai Oeia, with our Nu'upia ponds, and develop an MOU so that we can work together on renewing our fish ponds, focus on our Iwi Kupuna, and engage with lineal descendants from Makapu Peninsula. And I think those relationships just grow the more there's an understanding on the part of the people in the military side as to how important they are, how important that base access is to those areas that are important to the local community.
Mehana, where do you see this work going from here? What is your hope? What Doug laid out is significant, to have those kinds of conversations happening, that learning happening, that understanding happening. How do you hope that builds and grows?
Well, the hope is that, again, we have a Hawaii that is better, not worse, right? Environmentally, socially, here, that we have a Hawaii that we can live in, and the hope for me is that our conversations turn into more solutions, turn into more actions, turn into better things that is coming out sustained. Because that's the part. I mean, you haven't asked this, but to be real, right? The challenge is sustaining all the good work, right? When there's good work, is that going to change with the next leadership coming in? Is that going to change with the next government? Does that change as administrations change, right? And if that's so, then we have not done that really hard work of establishing a sense of place here in Hawaii that will be healthy for our children and our grandchildren, Right. That's the part that I'm more concerned about is the kind of environmental degradation that comes along, with the military, and how is it that we firm that up, so that we can clean up our spaces, right? Or they can help clean up the spaces, that they've engaged with, and make sure there's no Red Hill anymore, right? There won't be that scenario anymore, right? But anything like that is potential for that. And the hope is that this HUI that HCC put together, again, really is the opportunity for us to roll up our sleeves and get down to the nitty gritty and have those. I don't think we're there yet. I actually don't think we're there yet. I don't think we are there in this process where we've even hit the level of kind of doing a lot of the hard work, for both me and Doug, right? Like, I'm sure that's what things the community needs to kind of go through that too. So that's the hope, is that we keep moving forward in these discussions, that we don't leave the table until it's done, right? That we do the work that's necessary to create Hawaii that we all can live in, and that our generations from now.
I mean, what you're talking about is a tremendous cultural shift in the military, which is, an institution bigger than either of us can really put into words. How possible do you think that is?
I don't know, but I'm committed to the work. Right? I can speak for me. I can't control the military. I can't control them. So I know I'm committed, and I have hope that we can, right, on a very human level, create a Hawaii that we can all thrive in. Yeah.
Some of those issues that no doubt will continue to come up will be some of the land issues. And one of these conversations and topics that we've heard for some time now and will no doubt continue to gain more momentum is the military leases on some of these areas. I know that you can't speak specifically to what's happening in these conversations, Doug, or where things are at, but I'm wondering how the conversations that you're having now through this effort and through this movement is potentially helping in those future conversations as we look at what the future looks like with Hawaii's role and the military's relationship moving forward, and some of the discussions of how this new partnership and relationship moves forward with these lands. How do you think that this will be impacted by the work being done here?
I would say generally positively impacted. Again, if it was just our HUI, chatting once a month and going, hey, we need to fix some of these problems, I might not feel as confident. But because it's kind of gotten bigger and broader interest, I think there are opportunities. And there's just a different way of senior people looking at the problem, I think, than existed maybe pre-Red Hill. And there's two offices that are in the process of being set up. One has already been set up. It's called the Military and Community Relations Office at the state, and that's to help the state work with the military. Additionally, the Office of Secretary of Defense, which was part of the group that was there for the convening of a while back, I think it was in May, is setting up a liaison office so that people know who to go to. One of our challenges always is, at Marine Corps Base Hawaii, we have multiple installations across Oahu. We have to deal with different people clearly in Ko Lau Poko than we do over in Ewa Beach. And so knowing who it is that you need to talk to can be challenging. And I think these offices are really going to help with that, because we often get the same thing. It's like, well, we talk to somebody and then next week they're gone. There's a change of command. And so now we have to start all over again. I think with the setup of these offices, it's going to really help some of that ability to get to the right people to have these conversations.
I'm interested in as you're having these conversations, what you wish people understood about the military and its role in Hawaii. I think one of the things that Mehana said is, you live here and you're part of our community. And I'm curious, what do you wish there was deeper understanding on the side of the people, Kama'aina, who are here? And,
I would say, first and foremost, the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that come to Hawaii are sent here for a purpose. They don't choose to come here. Many of them love it because it's a beautiful place, but they come here with the thought in mind that they're here to defend people. And I think often what they may lack in understanding of the culture, they certainly make up for in the passion that they have to try to be good servants to the people here. And so I think if I were to say one thing, it's that they're here to serve. And we just need to do a better job on our side, I think, of early on when they get here, enculturating them into what's important in Hawaii so that they can better interact with the community. Because I think that's where sometimes we run afoul and we can do better.
Mihana, for you, was there ever anything that surprised you in these conversations about the military that maybe changed your perspective, that maybe you kind of knew or didn't necessarily know? But if there was any moment or any conversation or anything that was shared that made you think something different?
Just that they were the people we were having conversation with in both our smaller group and when the DOD came to Hawaii, is that there's a lot of things that are kind of just like how Doug alluded to, that they don't know. That they don't know about, Hawaii as a whole, Hawaii's people, Hawaii's culture, the role that history has played. Right, a lot of leadership now in different places was an active military during Kaho'olawe, right? Weren't around when Makua was, then taking over for live fire training, or Pohakuloa. Yeah, they don't understand the history of place enough to see why are these people feeling this way about us. Right, that they didn't know. That they didn't know that they needed to be educated. So that was kind of shocking, because I had just assumed that, they'd have a brief, somewhere that would have explained that and prepared them for that kind of conflict, potential conflict, within the community. But also, it was, I guess, good to see that they're struggling through trying to figure out things too. Okay, so most people wouldn't consider that a good thing, right? But I did, because I'm a process person, so I can appreciate when people are trying to figure out how to do things and do things right, and do things for the right purpose, right? When they're moving through that, and we can actively see that there's learning, there's engaging, there's different behaviors showing up. Then yeah, it's a larger discussion here in Hawaii about what is needed and what well-being means for Hawaii. That's a big discussion, and people will have sometimes very short answers for that. Yeah, just do this. Just tell the military to get out of Hawaii, or just do this, right? Sue this people, do that. On the everyday, on the level of complexity that we're all trying to deal with, I think this kind of process allows us to step through that. Again, as people who are concerned about where we're at, to impact the decisions that are made by people who are 5,000 miles away in a whole other end of the earth, making decisions about Hawaii.
We're almost out of time, but I want to ask each of you, from what you've described, these are not easy conversations. They require a lot of time, investment, intellect, and also heart, right? That these are tough. So I'm just curious to know, as you move forward, why each of you continue to come back. Doug, we'll start with you.
For me, it's personal. I mean, I've chosen to live in Hawaii. My family loves Hawaii. My adult children have come back to Hawaii. And so as I look to the future and I think of the scenarios that started this whole RHS process in the directions that Hawaii could go, there are some that you can clearly go, I don't want that one, because it's the future of my family here too, in addition to those who are originally from here. And then secondarily, from my military background, I just feel a requirement for us to do better, to listen more, and not only because it's the right thing to do, but because we need to do that to be able to progress in our mission.
And Mehana will give you the last word.
Yeah, mahalo for this conversation, and thank you, Doug. For me, Hawaii is homeland. Hawaii is the only place I'll ever call home. And I stay in it because, like food security, like energy concerns, like houselessness, like tourism, right? The military is such a big part of Hawaii right now, and I can sit at home and do nothing and watch it all pass by. Right, but I choose to be engaged in the conversations. I choose to pull community's voice forward, and I choose to stay in it with the health and well-being of our homeland on my mind every time.
Mehana and Doug, thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate this conversation. It was such an interesting one. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
What is Hawaii's soul?
It's the way we exist with all living things. The aina, the ocean, the sky, the kanaka, who originated from the islands.
And everyone who calls Hawaii home.
It's all of us living with island consciousness.
It's understanding that the past is in front of us so that everyone can follow the kupuna
that came before us.
It's our shared kuleana to take care of these islands.
And each other, because we belong to Hawaii.
We are Ko Hawaii.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalesuji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, we want to thank all of our guests who appeared on the program today, really diving into this relationship between Hawaii and the U.S. military. And you heard from all of our guests here that this is a work in progress, that this is not something that's going to be fixed overnight, and that this requires a lot of time, a lot of learning, but also a lot of listening.
Yeah, a lot of building trust, and very interesting to hear that it's not just leadership here in Hawaii from the military standpoint that is engaging in this work. It's also top brass flying in from Washington and being exposed to this work, being exposed to these conversations. And you heard Doug Wadsworth there saying that they are really listening and trying to take that into account. It is inch by inch on this topic. As you said, they are not nearly done. Still a long way to go, but very interesting to hear the commitment to this work and a lot of hope as to where it will go.
Yeah, I encourage you, if you miss any part of it, to go back and watch it on the digital platforms of Hawaii News Now to watch this conversation again. And we look to continue to keep you updated as more of these conversations happen. We're going to be switching gears next week, Tuesday, on our next episode and focusing in on politics.
Kim Koko Iwamoto unseated House Speaker Scott Saiki. She's going to be joining us along with leadership from the Hawaii Republican and Hawaii Democratic Party. What's the state of local politics here in Hawaii? What does that win tell us? We hope you join us for that conversation.
For now, we will leave you with a much clearer Honolulu skyline after the rough weather we had over the last few days. We'll see you right next week.
Aloha.